Recording in progress.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Haba. We're continuing in Mishnah Berurah, Daf HaShavot. We're learning Siman Nun Daled. We're up to Siv Gimel. Siman Nun Daled, Siv Gimel. Says the Mechaber, Hamasaper bein Yishtabach li Yotzer avera hi biyadoi v'choizer ala me'archei ha'malchama. Someone who speaks between Yishtabach and Yotzer, it's a sin, and he has to return from the war. So this is very interesting, because actually between Yishtabach and Yotzer is the most lenient part of the davening that there is. That's actually the most permissible time of talking, between Yishtabach and Yotzer. Nevertheless, someone who speaks then has to return from the war. The only thing that one is allowed to speak during that time is l'tzarchei tzibur. For example, let's say you need a minyan, or let's say for a public need, but any regular conversation between Yishtabach and Yotzer, which is the most lenient time, you have to return from the war. Why do you have to return from the war? Because you're not going to survive the war. If you have the sin on your cheshbon that a person talks about davening, they're not gonna win the war. Says Mishnah Berurah, Hamasaper, Uveksavim Kasav Loimar, Ba'asar Yemei Tshuva Mizmar Mimamakim K'Rasich Hashem, Ben Yishtabach Liyotzer V'Tzorach. The Arizal and the Kisvei Ari, it's written that during Asar Yemei Tshuva, you should say Shir Amalois between Yishtabach and Yotzer. But how could you do it? Asked the Mishnah Berurah. You're not allowed to talk between Yishtabach and Yotzer. That's why in the yeshivas they don't say it. In the yeshivas they don't say it. I sometimes, sometimes I'll daven Psukei de Zimra slower, instead of saying Shir Amalois Mimamakim K'Rasich Hashem with the tzibur, because the Mishnah Berurah questions whether you're allowed to say it. How could you talk between Yishtabach? You know, people, they get very into Shir Amalois Mimamakim. It's a shaila whether you're allowed to say it even. Why? You cannot interrupt between Yishtabach and Yotzer. This is just to the extent that we see how important it is not to speak out then. Okay, Lamaisa, the minhag is to say it. Mishnah Berurah doesn't understand why. Me'archei ha'malchama, Ratzalaim Radachsiv Bakra, the pasuk says, Mi ha'ish hayare v'rach halevav yelech v'yashev lebeisai. Who's the person who is fearful and soft-hearted? He should go to his house. B'amru Chazal, what does it mean? Hayare me'avera shabiyadai. Someone who is afraid from sins in his hand. V'zu gam kein b'chlal averahi. This is a sin, to talk even in the seemingly innocuous time. Again, it's not as chamor as Psukei de Zimra, it's not as chamor as Chazar Sashatz. Ve'el yarabba kasa b'shem matei Moshe shehaklipois mevatlin lalois hatfila. The El Yarabba says in the name of the Matei Moshe that the klipos are mevatel the tefillah from working. Meaning like this. There are these klipos, there are these forces of impurity that they're attacking the tefillah. And we cut down the klipos through Psukei de Zimra. When a person talks by davening, these klipos return. Oisam Hagadudim, these troops, that they wage war against us, therefore it is fitting not to talk. Therefore, by the way, the Chidah writes, if a person feels they're going to have to talk, it's better they shouldn't come to shul. They're better off staying in bed. What do you do if there's a shul where the people's talking? You have to close it down. You have to shut it. You have to close it down. You can't have such a thing. It's dangerous for the Jewish people. It's dangerous. It causes people harm. Lifsoik tzedakah. Now, what does it mean that choizer me'archei ha'malchama? Says Mechaber v'yesh mi she'omer shalatzarchei tzibur, for the needs of a tzibur. I lifsoik tzedakah, or meaning, let's say, to have an appeal. Let's say an ani walks in between Yishtabach and Yotzer, so the Gabe can make an announcement. We have an ani over here. Could everybody help out? That's considered tzarchei tzibur or a lifsoik tzedakah. Says Mishnah Berurah, v'hu adin l'chol dvar mitzvah, or any dvar mitzvah. Again, this is between Yishtabach and Yotzer. V'davka ben Yishtabach liYotzer shu inyan acher. That's the only time for a dvar mitzvah it's permitted is between Yishtabach and Yotzer. Avo ben Kaddish ubarchu, oy ben haprakim shel kriyashma. between Kaddish or Baruchu or Bein HaPragim Krishna or Berurah or Yishtabach Psuke de Zimra, Afser lahafsik afilu b'tzarchei rabim uledvar mitzvah. You cannot interrupt b'tzarchei rabim or dvar. Let's say somebody comes over to you, middle Psuke de Zimra. Oh, what's your name? We want to call you for an aliyah. Can't answer. Somebody comes to you middle Kriyas HaTorah. What's your name for an aliyah? You can't answer. You're not allowed to talk for a dvar mitzvah only between Yishtabach and Yotzer. Ukidal el b'siman nun aleph sivdalad el yarabah v'hagra el b'siman nun aleph sham. Fine. Some say litzarchet tzibor. I'm sorry. Sivkatan Zayin. That's further in the Ramah. Let's see the Ramah. Haga. Umizen ispashed. From here it has spread. Mashanagu bahar mekaimos. That's the custom many places. Lavarech chayla. To bless a sick person. Oilik boil beveis hakneses. Sheyasa loydin ben yishtach liyotzer. Let's say somebody is being oppressed and they need to somehow bring the court case to a bezdin. These are all instances where you could discuss this between Yishtabach and Yotzer. The choza mikri l'tzarch mitzvah. Ol achar kach, and afterwards, kishachoizrin lehispalel, when you come back to daven, yoimer hashtel tzibor miktsas psuke de zimra v'yomer kaddish lehem. Like this. Let's say you need a minyan. So you call a guy, let's say after Yishtabach, you call a guy up on the phone. Hey, Shloimi, you want to get out of bed to make a minyan? Fine. Then the chazan, when he comes back, what's he saying Kaddish on? Can't just say Kaddish on nothing. He had already said Yishtabach. So then he should say a few psukim and then say Kaddish on it. Ki la'olam ein omrim Kaddish b'loi tehila shalafanav. We never say Kaddish without some kind of praise before it, without some kind of tehillim or praise. B'lachein maschilan arvis b'loi Kaddish. That's why Mariv starts without Kaddish. Why do we start Mariv without Kaddish? We just say Baruchu. Because there's no tehillah before it. There's no mizmar ladav. There's no tehillah before it. So nusach svard, in order to get a kaddish, they say a tehillah before. But me'ikar hadin, there is no kaddish in the beginning of Marav. That's the way the Ramah learns. Says Mishnah Berurah, Hashliat tzibor mashma sivkat zayin dafilum loy amar rak hu levad hapsukim yachal amar kaddish. That's mashma, that if, let's say, there's an interruption and the Shel Tzibur wants to say Kaddish, even if just he says the Kaddish, that would warrant the recitation of, even if he just says the Psukim, that would warrant the recitation of Kaddish. Miksas Psuke de Zimra. Some Psuke de Zimra. Vim loy amar Psukim, loy amar Kaddish. And if the Shel Tzibur did not say Psukim, he should not say Kaddish. Rak yaschel Baruchu b'loy Kaddish. He should begin Baruchu without Kaddish. Shel ha'olam loy timtza Kaddish b'li Psukim shalafanav. Because we will never find Kaddish without Psukim before it. Im loy hashel Tzibur achar chazaras hatfila. Unless the shots after chazaras hatfila oy belachash ba'arvis. Why? How are we saying Kaddish there? How do you say Kaddish after Shemoneh Esrei? Shakadish koy al hatfila. There the Kaddish is going on the davening, on the tefillah. The Pri Megadim says a different reason. The reason why we say Kaddish after Shemoneh Esrei is because there are psukim in Shemoneh Esrei, namely Rifa'enu Hashem v'nei rafei. Even though I would argue that's not a pasuk. There's no pasuk Rifa'enu Hashem v'nei rafei. The pasuk is Rifa'eni Hashem v'ei rafei. There is no pasuk Rifa'enu Hashem, unless somehow it's still considered, changing it into Nusach Rabim, into Lashon Rabim, still allows it to retain it being a pasuk. But I'm not sure what psukim the Pri Megadim is referring to in the Shemoneh Esrei. I'm not aware of any psukim. You know, the Avudraham says all the words of Shemoneh Esrei emanate from psukim, but they're not necessarily direct verbatim quotes from psukim, but unless that's considered enough, close enough to psukim, that we could say Kaddish.
What about Hashem goes like this?
Yeah, you're right, that is a pasuk. But l'chayro, you need to say psukim, unless Yiyu l'ratzain is another pasuk. V'kasav Pri Megadim, v'kasav Magen Avram. Shalachei noagu lamer prisa shema baruchu nikres pris shema k'lakom b'sim savtes achar gemar tefillah Shemoneh Esrei b'lachash. The Magen Avraham says like this. What's Prisas Shema? Prisas Shema is if people come late and they miss Baruch. So what you could do is you could say Baruch, and some of the psukim, some of the brachos of Birchas Kriya Shema, they say it after Tefillah Shemona Esrei Belachas, Kedei sheyomer HaKaddish al Tefillah Shemona Esrei, in order to say Kaddish on Shemona Esrei. So in other words, the Prisas Shema is being done after the Chazaras Hashatz in order to say Kaddish, in order for the Kaddish to be going on Shemona Esrei. Aval achar kach, but afterwards, lo shayich loymar Kaddish. It's not possible to say Kaddish loy amar tchila mixas psukim, unless you said a few psukim first. V'ata chadoshim mikarabo. But now you have these newfangled, a new movement. Sheparsin Shema achar Kaddish basra. They want to say Prisas Shema after the final Kaddish of davening for people who came late. V'oimrim she'enis Kaddish, and they want to say Kaddish again. Ve'ino nachain dema inyan loyma shnei Kaddishim smuchim zalazeh. How could you say two Kaddishim close to each other? V'al kalpanim yeshalamdam sheyomru miktzas psukim bein shnei Kaddishim. At the very least, you have to teach them to say some psukim between the Kaddishim. By the way, later on, in Siman Nun Hes of Katan Aleph, the Mishnah Berurah says Toiv Lama'ed Bakadeshim. So to have, at the end of davening, you say a Mishnah and you say Kaddish and you say a Mizmar Tehillim and you say Kaddish, the Mishnah Berurah says it's incorrect.
This is referring also to Kaddish Yasam or just regular?
Any Kaddish. Yeah, both. Okay, so the Ramah says you should not say Kaddish without Tehillah. Oy achar tefillah, either after a praise or after a prayer. Like we said in the previous Sivkatan. Or after you learn something of Tar Shabbat Peh, Yuchal Lomer Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Now I was always wondering about this. Somebody actually sent me a message that they said I was not correct, because I mentioned in a shir that after you learn a Gemara, let's say we're learning Ksubas. So usually after Ksubas shir, I don't have them say, I don't finish and say, Reb Chananya ben Akasha Omer. I'll do that after a Perkei Avos shir. I'll do that after a Tefillah shir. If we're learning Agada, but if we're learning Gemara, I don't have like a Kaddish after. So here the Mishnah Berurah says that you're allowed to say Kaddish D'Rabbanan after Tar Shabbat Peh. But V'ayin b'Magen Avram Shamasik the Davkim Amar Achar Zeh Al Kavan Mixas Divrei Agada. You need to say some Agadata. And the Dirshu he brings that the Bir Halacha says in Siman Kuf Nun Hey that you're allowed to say Kaddish D'Rabbanan on Tar Shabbat Peh even without Agada. I guess that's what that person was asking me. But here, I was more familiar with what the Mishnah Berurah says here, that you need to say Divrei Agada, v'az yuchal loymar HaKaddish D'Rabbanan, ki yikar HaKaddish zen niskan al Divrei Agada. V'al kein minhag kol Yisrael loymar, achar Pirkei Avos, v'achar b'mem adlikin, ha'maymar, d'Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha, oy amar Rabbi Laza, amar Rabbi Chanina, tamid chacham marbim shalom. So the Magen Avram, by the way, says that after Ein Kelo Kenu, we should still say Talmidei Chacham Marbim Shalom, because the Iker Kaddish D'Rabbanan, or any Kaddish, is not just on Tar Shabbat Peh, but it's on Agada. Ulefi zeh yesh li zahar kishalom de mishnayis yoimru b'soif halimud hamaymer d'Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha u'chedoyma kedei sheyuchayim lemar yidei zachar kach HaKaddish D'Rabbanan. So the Mishnah Berurah here says, according to the Magen Avram, this is what I thought, that if you're learning Tar Shabbat Peh, including Mishnah, you should make sure to conclude with some Divrei Agada, because the Iker Kaddish D'Rabbanan is going on Agada. V'achar Tanakh, after Tanakh, Chumash, Nevi'im, Ksum, you're allowed to say Kaddish Shalom. Afilu rak achar shlosh psukim. So it's interesting. Tanakh allows you to say Kaddish more than Tar Shabbat Peh. Tanakh, you could say Kaddish. Tar Shabbat Peh, it seems like you should say a Agadata. Again, the Dirshu brings that the Bir Halach and Siman Kuf Nun Hey seems to say even if you didn't say Haggadah. V'achar Tanach Oimrim Kaddish. Okay. Ve'in loimer Kaddish elam ken hoya asar nashim basic nes b'shas amir subsukim ba'limud. You can only say Kaddish if 10 people learning. You can't have a shir for 2 people and then at the end 8 people walk in and you want to say Kaddish. But he says, if let's say you have 2 or 3 people learning, Oimrim Kaddish k'sheyesham asara. It sounds like this. Even if only 2 or 3 people were learning, but you need 10 people to have been there during the learning. You hear this? In other words, you don't have to have 10 people learning. You need 10 people to have been in the Beis HaKnesses at the time of the limud. Because he just said before, you can't say Kaddish unless there are 10 people in the Beis HaKnesses b'shas amira, even if only 2 or 3 people were learning. V'afilu mi shaloi lamad. And even a guy who wasn't learning, yachal gam ken loimer Kaddish, he's able to say the Kaddish, k'may beprisa shema lekaman b'simin samach tes. Okay, we'll hold it over here. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Be'ezus Hashem. Have a wonderful day.
Why is it that you're allowed to add a few psukim to say Kaddish by Yishtabach, but Shir Amalos to Tzarachian?
Okay, good question. I would say because really you're not supposed to talk then. You're not supposed to interrupt. Elamai. So therefore we don't interrupt. And that's why we say Kaddish right after Yishtabach. In a situation where you had to interrupt, now you're up the creek without a paddle. So what do you do? You have no choice. You already interrupted. So you're going to have to say psukim in order to be able to say Kaddish. But to be koiveya lechatchila that you should say Shir Amalos, that the Mishnah Berurah doesn't understand.
And after Tanakh you say Kaddish Shalom. Why is it after Kriyas Torah we say Chatzi Kaddish?
I don't know what he means by Kaddish Shalom. I don't think he means classic Kaddish Shalom because you didn't daven. You can't say Teskabel Tzoloisain. So l'char he can't mean regular Kaddish Shalom. L'char he means Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Right? So now why don't we say Kaddish D'Rabbanan after Kriyas HaTorah? I'm not sure. Maybe. When do we say Kaddish D'Rabbanan? We say it after, let's say, Ba'mem Alikin. We say it after Ein Kelekenu, when they were Mesakein Limud. When they're Mesakein Limud, so they're Mesakein Kaddish D'Rabbanan. But Kriyas HaTorah, is that Limud or is that Takanas Chachamim? So if it's Takanas Chachamim, then it's Meitzuras HaTfilah. If it's Meitzuras HaTfilah, there's no Kaddish D'Rabbanan on Suras HaTfilah. There's Kaddish D'Rabbanan when the Tfilah is, when the section is learning. Okay, we said Karbanos now. We said Ba'mam Alikin. We said Ein Kelekenu. So they're Mesakein learning, so Mesakein Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Kriyas HaTorah, I mean, the truth is it is learning, but maybe it's not learning of Yechidim, it's the learning of the Rabbim. So it's Meitzuras HaTfilah. But I don't know. I'm not sure. Good question. Okay. Hatzlacha. Have a good day.
Rebbe was bothered by the lack or the question, where are the psukim in
yeah, in
answer that you said.
Yeah.
He says Shakadosh Koi al Hatfilah. He doesn't even mention the psukim there. He says the then he brings in the priest of Shema, but why can't Kaddish go al Hatfilah? I mean, there's no such concept. It's only al psukim. Where do we see that? And he mentions like 2 separate things. He says like Tim's a Kaddish, but like believe psukim shalafanav. But then he says. Then Which one is it?
So 1 second. Originally he says,
Right, what did that mean? Rabbi's reading that to mean the psukim.
No. I didn't read that to mean. I read that to mean that is going on the Shemana Esrei. Then I mentioned the Pri Megadim, who says differently, that it's going on the psukim in the davening. So that, I said I didn't understand the Pri Megadim because I don't know of psukim in the Shemana Esrei. But the svara that the Mishnah Berurah said is it going on the tefillah, and you're right. That's what he says in Sivkatan Tes, Beloi Tehila, Oy Achar HaTefillah, Kamot Shegasam Sivkatan HaKoidem.
Right, okay, fine. I didn't hear the prima gun. Okay, fine, that's what it was. Okay, shkach.
Okay, shkach. Okay, well done.